What are we discussing on today's podcast, you ask? Well, first we got to discuss that disgusting D-backs game one loss, the St. Louis Cardinals. Then we got part two with Sully Baseball. We're breaking down the 2023 Hall of Fame ballot. Are the guys getting in this year legit? Sully's going to break it down for me. We take a look at some of the steroid guys. Always got to debate those guys, of course. Then we even take a look at next year's ballot, some of the no-brainers, the locks, and some wild cards. So we're discussing all that on today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast.
You are Locked on Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day listening to who? Always charismatic host of this podcast, Millard Thomas. I'm a multimedia journalist and I'm a graphic designer, so please go check out my website, millardthomas24.myportfolio.com. On there you can see all my latest work, from my packages to my articles to my photos and my graphic design. If you want to see more content by me, just follow me on Twitter at CreatorThomas24 from my personal account, or just look up Locked on Diamondbacks about Twitter, Instagram for the podcast handle. And of course, thank you for making Locked on Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free and available on all platforms, so please continue to tell your friends. And one of those platforms is YouTube, so please hit subscribe on the Locked on Diamondbacks YouTube channel. If you go to Locked on Diamondbacks on YouTube right now, you can see we are joined by my friend Ketel Marte, not the actual player, but the bobblehead, joining us on today's live stream. And don't forget, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Now let's get into the podcast and let's discuss this D-backs game one loss and just the D-backs vibe in general right now, because the vibes are not good surrounding the D-backs right now, right? It feels like we are spiraling. It feels like us as D-backs fans are kind of in a state of despair right now because, listen, personally, I'm a guy that rides the emotional roller coaster. So when the D-backs were riding high 3 games in the NL West ahead of the Dodgers for first place, best believe I was talking crap. I was trash talking every Dodgers fan I saw on the street. I was like, yo, how does it feel to be in second? But now that the D-backs are fighting for third place in the NL West, I'm like, oh, hello, Mr. Dodger fan. I'm like a turtle now. I'm like a hermit. I'm like wearing turtlenecks. I got my hat on. I'm like trying to be undercover, basically. Like, I don't want anyone to know that I'm a D-backs fan right now because it doesn't feel good. Despite the D-backs still holding on to a wild card spot right now, it just does not feel great to be a D-backs fan right now. After that game one loss to the St. Louis Cardinals, the D-backs are now currently on a 5-game losing streak after losing the finale to the Atlanta Braves, which they should have won thanks to Miguel Castro giving up a home run in that 9th inning. They got swept by the Cincinnati Reds. Can't say much there because the Reds just straight up outplayed the D-backs. Then this game one against the St. Louis Cardinals, a game the D-backs definitely should have won, but once again, we saw the D-backs closing struggles rear its ugly head once again because the D-backs started Ryan Nelson in this game, who's been pitching very well recently, but not tonight because he gives up 5 earned runs, 6 innings pitched, and you knew from the jump it was not going to be a good Ryan Nelson start because he gave up 2 runs in the first. He had like 30-something pitches in the first inning. Like, from the jump, you knew it wasn't going to be a good start for Ryan Nelson, but you're like, you know what? It's okay if he's not great today because the D-backs offense should at least be alive with Adam Wainwright on the mound, right? Because Adam Wainwright is basically the Cardinals version of Madison Bumgarner. He went to this game on a potential pitch limit. The broadcast was saying like 60 pitches, ended up throwing 76, but it was very Madison Bumgarner-esque. Like, the Cardinals were like, we're going to throw you out there for 5 innings. If you can give up 3 earned runs or less, we'll consider that a victory. And that's exactly what Adam Wainwright did. Felt like he was leaving some pitches over the middle of the zone that the D-backs could have crushed, but no one was able to take advantage of it. And that's partly due because if you look at the D-backs post All-Star numbers, not the prettiest for some guys on our team. Like when you really talk about why the D-backs are struggling, and tonight's game was just a microcosm of why the D-backs are struggling. It's not just the closing, because we know the closing has been an issue, right? It hasn't just been the closing this year. It's been the closing the last few years. I mean, you go back to 2020, the D-backs have had one of the worst closing situations in baseball over the last half decade, over the last 3 to 4 years. And this year, they're slightly better at it. Their bullpen is actually solid, but the ninth inning, it's just where nightmares are made for the D-backs, and you really can't explain why. Literally, if you look at the Chafins, the Castros, the McGuffs, the Ginkles, like, I would have to double check Ginkle, but those other three guys I named, if you check their numbers in save and non-save situations, like all those guys are just straight up better in non-save situations. And you check their numbers in the ninth inning, it's like these guys turn into different pitchers when the game is on the line, when the pressure's ratcheted up. Only in the ninth inning, though. You could put McGuff in like you did in game one tonight. He'll get you that 1-2-3 inning in the eighth inning with a 1-run lead. But you put McGough in the ninth inning in that situation tonight with that Andrew Chafin had, and I'm not sure the results are different, because that's just what we've seen from the D-backs recently. And it just feels like the D-backs are just never in sync with both their offense and their pitching. You see tonight, the offense did come alive late. They still put 6 runs on the board, but the pitching was not able to hold it up. And look at some of their more recent losses, like game 2 against the Cincinnati Reds. You lose 2-4. You don't score enough runs there. Game 1 against the Cincinnati Reds, you lose 6-9. Your pitching just doesn't come through for you. And that's just been a trend the whole month of July. Either your offense puts up like 5 to 7 runs, but you give up 6-9, or maybe you only give up 4 runs or less, but then your offense only scores 2 or 3 runs. Like the D-backs have not been in sync on both pages on their offense and their pitching. I think one of the reasons is because with Merrill Kelly hurt, like that just puts so much more pressure on the other guys in the rotation. Zach Gallen has to truly be elite every time he goes out there. You're putting another dude in the rotation who are just going to be on the same level of a Ryan Nelson or a Tommy Henry. So could be good or could be super volatile. And chances are that guy who you're putting in over Merrill Kelly is not going to pitch as deep into the ball games as Merrill Kelly. So the bullpen now is going to get more worn out. So just one guy missing starts affects every person in the pitching staff. Plus, you mix in the fact that this D-backs offense has just been struggling post All-Star break. Like outside of Ketel Marte, who is batting .333 with not batting .333. Entering tonight's game, he was batting .333, but post All-Star break, you could easily say batting over .330, over 1,100 OPS post All-Star break. But the rest of the team, Moreno's been the second best player during that time, but very small sample size. Same with Nick Ahmed. That's been your second, third best player during that time. After that, Emmanuel Rivera's batting below .220. Corbin Carroll batting below .240. Christian Walker batting below .220. Alec Thomas batting below .210. Like the D-backs offense post All-Star break, outside of Ketel Marte, everyone is pretty much struggling. And we know Gabriel Moreno just put on the injured list. So you can't even say, hey, let's put him in the lineup a little bit more to get this offense some resurgence and some juice, because he's also going to be out a few days. So when I'm looking at this D-backs team right now, they're not in sync. The offense can be good, but the pitching will be bad. The pitching can be good, but the offense can be bad. You need Merrill Kelly desperately back, who might be back for game 2 of the series. The broadcast was talking about it a little bit. So if Merrill Kelly's back for game 2, I think that would be huge. I mean, we all know that would be huge. I don't even have to really reiterate that point or really, dive into a deep analysis of why Merrill Kelly is important to this D-backs team in rotation. But once you get him back, that should hopefully balance out a little bit with the pitching staff and some of the weight some of those guys have to put on their shoulders and some of the workload some of those guys take, but it won't help out the offense. We just need guys like Lourdes Gurriel, who has been the worst player on this team post All-Star break. He's batting below 200 and it's just not looking pretty, below 400 OPS. Like Lourdes Gurriel might need a couple days off just because he's been struggling so bad. And with the deadline approaching, this D-backs team needs to be aggressive and needs to be buyers at the deadline. I'm not saying you have to go out there and trade for Ohtani, even though that would be nice. Of course, he's a rental. If you can give me an assurance he's going to resign with the D-backs, then I think it's an all-in play. But You probably don't need to go after the Otanis. You don't even have to go after the Dylan Ceases of the world. A Giolito would be cool, but the D-backs, if you could just add a guy like a David Robertson or another, Carlos Estevez from the Angels, and then just go add some guy that could platoon on the left side of the infield for you to add some additional pop, or maybe you want an upgrade in the right field because you don't trust a full season of Jake McCarthy and Alec Thomas out there, and you want a true everyday player they could put out there. I think getting a guy in the rotation and another arm or two in the back end of the bullpen is the most important thing. I think Mike Hazen needs to be aggressive at this deadline and try to add some arms, because I don't want to have a whole first half where the D-backs are, tied for the NL West division lead at the first half mark, and then look at the standings at the end of the second half and see the D-backs on the outside looking in for the postseason. That would be the worst case scenario. I don't care if entering the season I said if the D-backs end the year with an 8 on that win-loss record, that would make me happy, and I would consider that a successful season. That was true before the season started. But now, after watching this team for basically 100 games, this team should be in the postseason, and Mike Hazen and Torey Lovullo need to do everything possible to make sure this team makes the playoffs. And if this team does make the playoffs, you're going to need to buy tickets, and the best place to buy tickets is Game Time. So let me tell you guys really quick about why Game Time is so cool and why that needs to be your place for last minute ticket deals, because you can forget planning months in advance. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. Get exclusive flash deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. The Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. Get images of your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account or redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.